Today, we're jumping straight into the 1856 U.S. presidential election. The sources really frame this as, well, a critical moment.
Absolutely, a flashpoint.
Yeah, where this powerful new party, the Republicans, burst onto the scene, and the country was just incredibly divided over slavery. It really set the stage for the Civil War.
It certainly laid a lot of groundwork.
So our mission here is to unpack why this election was so pivotal. We'll look at the key players, the stakes, really try to get a feel for it.
Definitely. And the mid-1850s is this interesting period. You've got, like, real economic growth, railroads expanding everywhere.
No progress.
Right. Seems positive on the surface.
But underneath, the nation is just tearing itself apart over slavery. That conflict was starting to overshadow everything in politics.
Okay, so the heart of it, based on what we've read, was this question. Would slavery spread west? Would the new territories, the new states, be free or slave?
That was the fundamental question, yes. And it became incredibly contentious.
And the Kansas-Nebraska Act in '54, that really threw gasoline on the fire, didn't it? Oh, absolutely. That act introduced popular sovereignty.
Meaning the settlers themselves would vote on slavery, not Congress.
Exactly. Sounds democratic, maybe.
Yeah.
But in practice, well, it was a disaster. Both pro- and anti-slavery groups just poured into Kansas trying to swing the vote.
Leading to actual fighting.
Yes, leading to what became known as Bleeding Kansas, real violence.
So Bleeding Kansas. It wasn't just the catchy name. It was like a small-scale civil war almost, a preview of what was coming nationally.
A grim preview, yeah. And in the middle of all this, the old political system was just crumbling.
Right. The Whig Party,
Right.
a major force for decades, just couldn't handle the slavery issue. It basically disintegrated.
It really did. It's kind of amazing how fast a major party could just collapse over that one issue. It tells you how central slavery had become.
No kidding. It dominated everything. And then out of that collapse, you get the Republican Party, brand new, but united on one thing, stopping slavery's expansion.
Exactly. So the 1856 election sets up this three-way race. You've got James Buchanan for the Democrats,
Yeah.
John C. Frémont, the first ever Republican presidential nominee,
A big deal in itself.
and Millard Fillmore, running for the Know-Nothings. Each offered a totally different path forward for a country clearly in crisis.
These three really do capture the different anxieties and options of the time. Let's maybe start with Buchanan,
Yeah.
the Democrat.
Okay, Buchanan. He was pitched as the experienced guy, the ultimate diplomat, long resume, Secretary of State, Minister to Britain.
Right. And crucially, he hadn't been directly involved in the Kansas-Nebraska fight recently because he was out of the country.
Exactly. Which, maybe counterintuitively, made him appealing to Democrats. They wanted someone who wasn't covered in the mud from that fight. A compromise candidate, maybe?
Someone who could maybe hold things together. His platform was about, what? Keeping the South happy, preserving the Union, and sticking with popular sovereignty.
That was the idea.
Yeah.
Appease the South, keep the Union intact, let the territories decide on slavery. So present it as a moderate, at least on the surface.
Okay, now contrast that with John C. Frémont, the Republican.
Totally different. Frémont was the dashing explorer, the pathfinder, much younger, more dynamic image, less political baggage, perhaps.
And this was the first time the Republicans ran someone for president. The party was only, what, 2 years old?
Just 2 years old. It shows how fast that anti-slavery feeling was mobilizing in the North. Incredible, really.
And his platform. Simple.
Very simple, very direct. Stop the expansion of slavery, period. No ifs, ands, or buts.
A direct challenge to the South. A rallying cry for the North.
Absolutely, a moral and political stand.
Okay, and then the third guy, Millard Fillmore.
Right, the former president. He jumps back in with the Know-Nothing Party, or the American Party, as they call themselves.
And their main thing wasn't slavery, was it? It was something else.
Primarily, no. Their core issue was nativism, anti-immigration. They were especially focused on Catholic immigrants from Ireland and Germany.
So while the country is wrestling with this huge moral issue of slavery, the know-nothings are saying, hey, the problem is the immigrants.
Pretty much. Fillmore tried to position himself as the law and order guy, the one who could offer stability. But that anti-immigrant focus, it turned a lot of people off, even if some former Whigs were looking for an alternative.
Yeah, it seems like they were trying to sidestep the main event, in a way, though maybe tapping into other anxieties about change.
Possibly. Fear of change, fear of outsiders.
Yeah.
But ultimately, slavery was the issue that couldn't be ignored.
Yeah.
Their attempt to dodge it limited their appeal as things got more polarized.
So the campaign itself, the sources suggest it wasn't exactly polite debate.
Sure, not at all. It was described as a brawl The gloves were definitely off. The stakes felt incredibly high to everyone involved.
And the Democrats, they were basically saying a Republican win means war.
Explicitly.
Have-
Their slogan was literally, "A vote for Frémont is a vote for civil war." Talk about raising the stakes. Fear was a major tactic.
Wow, and the Republicans, how did they push back?
They argued Buchanan was a puppet of the slave power. That's the term they used for the Southern elite, the slaveholders who they claimed were pulling the strings in Washington.
So they painted Buchanan as being controlled by the South.
Exactly. They appealed to Northern voters' fears of Southern dominance, but also to their moral objections to slavery. It was a potent mix.
And meanwhile, Fillmore and the Know-Nothings are still mostly focused on blaming immigrants for society's problems.
Largely, yes. It highlights the different anxieties swirling around. For some, immigration felt like the biggest threat. For others, it was clearly slavery.
And geographically, the country just split, right?
Completely. The South lined up almost solidly behind Buchanan. They saw him as the only one who would protect slavery.
And the North?
Overwhelmingly for Frémont, driven by that anti-slavery expansion sentiment. Fillmore picked up support here and there in Maryland, some former Whigs, the strong nativists, but it was scattered.
So the results come in, Buchanan wins, gets 174 electoral votes.
He does. But look where Frémont's votes came from. You got 114 electoral votes.
And every single one was from a northern state.
Every single one. Fillmore only got Maryland's 8 votes. The map just screamed polarization.
The popular vote was a bit closer, though. Buchanan didn't get a majority.
No, he got about 45%. Frémont got 33%. Fillmore around 22%. But the key takeaway was that sectional divide. It was stark.
And even though they lost, it was a huge showing for the Republicans, wasn't it? For a 2-year-old party to dominate the North like that.
Absolutely astonishing. It proved they were a major force almost overnight. And Frémont's run itself, the first major candidate openly against slavery's expansion, that was revolutionary.
Yeah, a real turning point. So Buchanan wins, takes office. And how does that go? History hasn't been kind, has it?
No, it really hasn't. His presidency is often seen as, well, disastrous. Right away in 1857, you get the Dred Scott decision from the Supreme Court.
Oh, right. That was huge. The court ruled that African Americans weren't citizens?
Weren't citizens, and that Congress couldn't ban slavery in the territories anyway.
Yeah.
It basically endorsed the Southern view.
And Buchanan supported it.
Openly supported it. There were even whispers, strong suspicions, that he'd improperly influenced the justices beforehand. It just deepened the anger and mistrust in the North.
And then there was more trouble in Kansas.
Yep. The Lecompton Constitution, a pro-slavery constitution drafted in Kansas. Most settlers there actually opposed it.
But Buchanan backed it anyway.
He did. Threw his support behind it, trying to force Kansas in as a slave state. That move infuriated Republicans, obviously, but it also split his own Democratic Party. Northern Democrats were appalled.
Man. And wasn't there an economic crash, too?
The Panic of 1857 hit the economy hard, especially in the North. It just felt like one thing after another was going wrong under his watch.
But the biggest criticism usually is about how he handled secession, right? After Lincoln won in 1860.
That's probably the defining failure. As Southern states started leaving the Union, Buchanan basically froze. He said secession was illegal,
Okay.
but he also believed the federal government had no power to stop them. So he essentially did nothing.
You just watched it happen.
Pretty much. It raises huge questions about leadership in a crisis. Can you just declare yourself powerless?
So by the time he left office, several states had already gone.
7 states had seceded. He basically handed Abraham Lincoln a nation already breaking apart. The fuse lit in '56 was now burning very short.
So looking back, the 1856 election didn't start the war, but it feels like the point of no return.
I think that's fair. It showed compromise was failing. It revealed the sheer power of this new Republican Party built on opposing slavery's spread. The political landscape had fundamentally shifted.
The divisions were just too deep. The election forced the issue, maybe, made it clear that the country had to choose a side.
It really did. And Buchanan's presidency, coming out of that election, well, his low historical ranking seems understandable given the context. He couldn't bridge the divide. Arguably, he deepened it.
The forces pushing towards conflict were just too strong by then. His presidency sort of demonstrated the failure of that middle ground approach he represented in '56.
Exactly. And maybe the biggest lesson from 1856 is about trying to stay neutral or find compromise on something that's fundamentally a moral crisis.
The center couldn't hold.
That phrase really captures it. You look at that electoral map from '56, the clear north-south split. It's like watching the country fracture in real time.
And just 4 years later, It did fracture. Utterly.
The whole thing just exploded. A truly pivotal election, and one that still holds lessons, I think.
It really makes you think, doesn't it, about what happens when a society tries to avoid confronting these huge fundamental moral disagreements.
Yeah, hoping they'll just
Mhm.
go away. It rarely works like that. It raises questions about today, too. Are there parallels? What's the cost of not taking a clear stance when core values are at stake? It suggests that seeking that middle ground sometimes it's just not possible or even desirable.